you know, it's really interesting. How can you paralyze a response? You got 50,000 nuclear warheads. How, even if you reduced them by 25%, what would be paralyzed about it? I mean, McNamara said, give me 200 warheads, that's all I need. The other thing I'd like to address, you know, the whole psychology of this is you don't trust the Russians, you don't do this. That has been so built up in our psyche. And someone mentioned the Korean airliner. All right, the Korean airliner was shot down. There was a lot of hue and cry and moral outrage, and we got it in the United Nations and so forth. In 1978 or 79, the Israelis shot down a Libyan civilian aircraft because it had violated Israeli airspace. President Nixon sent a wire to Gaddafi and to Sadat apologizing for this incident. There was no talk about it going into the United Nations. The International Pilots Associations had their meeting. There was 102 nations that voted to condemn Israel, and 4 that voted not to, and the American representative abstained. Why? Because we couldn't create an enemy there. But when the Soviets shoot down an airliner, the same situation, we rise in moral outrage against this act. What is the difference? Because it's insistent. We must insist that the Soviets have got to be created as an enemy. Otherwise, if they're not really a big enough enemy, how are we going to get appropriations for more arms? Now, and I'd like to get into the other area. I'm sorry if this is a speech and you don't like them, but people keep talking about national security, and we got to be tough, and we got to be strong. Okay, we're tough, and we're strong, and we've released all these missiles now, the intermediate range missile, the Pershing II, and we're going to have more Tridents too. And what was the Soviet response? The Soviet response is to put cruise missile into attack submarines and put more of them off our coast. Now, if someone's going to tell me that that increases our national security, well, I don't know. It's a whole ball game that I don't understand.
If Russia is on the short end of the stick as far as nuclear heads are concerned, why aren't the Russians more willing to negotiate? Why would they walk out?
Because, look, right,
Just one, I'd like, wait, one last shot and then I'll quit, all right? A month ago, there was a little article in the New York Times about Clark being moved over to the interior. One of the things that they said that this bothered the critics because his competence...
Judge William Clark, National Security Advisor, moved to Interior to replace Jim Watt.
He was a Supreme Court judge in the state of California. He had relatively no credentials, and that they were nervous about that. And that had been heightened since the president had spoken to about 30 congressmen and had said that he had just realized that the bulk of the Soviet arsenal was in heavy land-based missiles, and therefore it might have seemed a little one-sided on our part that we had called for the dismantling of these things. Now, wait a second, guys. Let's go back and look at that. That the President of the United States had just realized that the bulk of the Soviet arsenal was in land-based missiles? So it raises the question, have we been negotiating fairly with the Soviets on anything that would make any sense to
Well, the other point,
no,
too,
we haven't been.
SALT II was agreed to by the Russians.
Took
and
7
as you know,
years.
And our Senate has failed to ratify. So that doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just that we can't say we don't trust the Russians and then negotiate 2 important arms limitation agreements with them. You either can trust them and you negotiate, or you don't trust them, and we'll arm ourselves to the teeth.
What is trust? Can somebody explain to me what trust has to do with this? I mean, does anybody, do you know what a treaty is?
Well, plenty. If you can't trust the other guy, then...
It has nothing to do, Phil, with trust. We have satellites in orbit that verify whether the Soviets deploy any new missiles in violation of the previous SALT agreements. We don't ask the Russians whether they did it. We go and look for it ourselves. And if we see them making some violations, like we recently have got some things we're unhappy about, well, we confront them with it, and they better come forward and tell us what's going on. And every case that has happened since 1963, when Kennedy did the Limited Test Ban Treaty, we have got a satisfactory answer. And now, that's a pretty good record.
And we'll be back in just a moment.